stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
We are live on whatever device you're watching us on this Wednesday, October 11th. Welcome to the Sports Wrap. I am the Prince of Picks, Sam Y, the sports guy, in for Jason today on this Wednesday, and we've got an awesome show coming up for you today. We'll get in to the MLB postseason with my guy, Matt Stryker, here momentarily. We were also going to talk some NHL. They started their season last night. Connor Bedard, the new face of the Chicago Blackhawks, made his debut, and he tallied a point in his very first game. We'll talk all about that. And there's tons of NFL injury news. We're going to get all into that in the third segment today. Justin Jefferson landing on IR. Anthony Richardson's going to be out for a while. James Conner, even though the Cardinals are irrelevant, is that going to be a big loss for them? We'll talk about it later, but let's get things started. Let's bring in my man, Matt Stryker. You can check him out on MLB Network on Bettor's Eye. He's a host there. He also hosts Fantasy Sports Today over on Sports Grid. Matt, first of all, thanks for joining the Sports Wrap today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm incredibly excited. And I got to tell you, you can't go to Arizona now, because you just insulted a ton of Cardinals fans who would beg to differ that team could very well be relevant. They are plucky, as they say.
That's true. That's true. We do a contenders or pretenders segment on Tuesdays here on the Sports Wrap, and I thought about them as a contender for a second, but that NFC West, I think that NFC West is just going to eat itself alive when you get below the San Francisco 49ers. Let's get into the baseball, Matt. It was an ugly day yesterday for the Baltimore Orioles. This is a team that goes through the entire regular season without being swept, and then they're swept right out of the playoffs. They're the second team to ever do that. The 1998 Padres were the first. They were managed by Bruce Bochy, I believe. Shout out Sarah Langs for that great stat. Follow her on Twitter at @SLangsOnSports. But Matt, what did you make of this series? Because I was so high on the Orioles all year. I thought the prospects were really going to pan out, and they did. They were great during the regular season. Was it the experience that just held them back in the postseason?
It's a good question to ask, and I think it's a question that everyone needs to ask looking ahead to fantasy baseball, looking ahead to wagering, just looking ahead. I think it's the most important thing that we as fans can do in this day and age with all the information that's out there. Being ignorant is a choice. Shows like yours will lead people to make the right choice. With that said, there's the age-old adage that the pitching, these young, untested pitchers just could not handle the situations. And nobody was talking about the fact that they had a great bullpen, Baltimore. But then they suffered. Several guys went down. They lost a guy at Tommy John. They thought he'd come back. He couldn't come. This is what it was about. This was a learning experience for this team and this organization. Let's see how they bounce back. I'd love to see what their win total is going to be set for coming up, because this is the conversation we should be having.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I know it was 77.5 coming into this past season, and I only know that because I was on the over very heavily. That panned out. Sure. But you got to think that's going to be up in the 90s next season, right? Like mid-90s even?
Depends on what type of pitching they return. Depends on the bullpen. This is the being in today's market, it changes so quickly. This Orioles team might not look anything like what they look like today come next season.
It's a good point. It's very true. Let's get into the action coming up tonight, because the most fun series of this MLB postseason so far has been this Braves-Phillies series. It's 1-1. It goes back to Philadelphia tonight. Live numbers for the series are Braves -152, Phillies +124. Tonight it's Elder and Nola, and the Braves are the slight underdog. What do you think about this game, Matt? And what do you thought about this series so far? Are we just betting on the home team in every game? Is that how much of a home field advantage these two teams have?
It's the same way we've been playing Atlanta and Philadelphia probably for the last 45 days of the regular season. Team totals. Totals in the game, team totals, and that's it. And sit back and don't worry. Outside of that first game, which, what was it, 4-1? Something to that effect. My memory is horrible. I've got 2 brain cells left. But the point is that everything is going to reach, depending on how it's set. If it's set at 9, we can have a different conversation. But they're going to be set anywhere between 7 and 8.5, 7 and 8. That's where the money is.
3-0 in that first game. But yeah, other than that, I'm right there with you. And, both of these guys, Elder and Nola, I don't want to say that they're past their prime, but they're definitely not having the best seasons of their career this year. And by no means are either of them the aces of their pitching staff. So I like that angle. I actually haven't played a lot of the totals in this series. I've been very focused on the sides, but totals are a much less volatile market when you're looking at these two teams. So I really like that. Talking about the Astros and the Twins. Now, the book is looking at this series as over at 2-1. It's minus 385 for the Astros right now and plus 290 for the Twins. Now, I will say the Twins looked pretty electric early in this postseason, Matt, and at almost 3-1, I'm kind of inclined to bet on them to come back in this series. Your thoughts on the Astros and their potential in this postseason? Could they lose to the Twins in the ALDS?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course I can. Wait a minute. Especially in these remember, it's not a 4 out of 7. When I was growing up, everything was 4 out of 7, and that's where teams showed themselves. Who had the better back end? Who had the better bottom of the lineup? Who was longer? I grew up in a time where the 86 Mets, if you look at them today on paper, you're just like, what? But there was a team that, because these were 4 out of 7 game series, we were able to advance. To the point, if you don't know, don't play. What do we know? We know that Yordan Alvarez is good for over 1.5 total bases. That's what we know. So play that and don't try to sweat some of this other stuff because that's how you lose.
So I've seen a lot of comparisons of Yordan Alvarez to the David Ortiz of the former Red Sox, right? Do you think that that's a fair comparison? Because I don't hate the comparison. I just feel like Alvarez has a little bit more a few more clubs in the bag, as they say. It feels like Alvarez, while Ortiz was a great hitter, it feels like Alvarez is a little more able to do things in that Houston offense. And to me, I think that makes the Houston offense so much more profitable, that you can bet on their team totals and be more confident in it when you've got a guy like Alvarez in the middle of the lineup. But you look at the rest of that lineup and they haven't produced, obviously, as they have in years past. Are you at all concerned with the Astros lineup outside of Yordan Alvarez?
So if I am, yeah, sure. To answer your question, yes. As a wagerer, I don't want to knock myself out with that. I don't want to say, oh, is Bregman going to come around? Oh, is Tuck going to do this thing? I want to go with what I know. And it brings me back to my point about Alvarez, but something that you said that I think listeners and viewers should really pay attention to. It makes the rest of the offensive ecosystem profitable. You can play things like someone to score a run. Just look at the lineup and see who's hitting behind Alvarez. Use your common sense. Start to think of things, before Alvarez. Start to think of things along those lines, all around the thing you know, which is Alvarez is usually good for over 1.5 total bases. How can I monetize this further?
We got to get into this Dodgers series before I let you go, Matt. They fell behind 2-0 to the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks, who finished the regular season grasping for air almost. They're plus 390 now, the Dodgers are, to come back in this series. But, we had the return of playoff Kershaw in game 1. They fell apart again in game 2. What's your confidence level like for the Dodgers in general in the playoffs moving forward?
You, again, have to go with what you know, and what you know isn't working right now. I mean, bat is cold, but I know that Freddie Freeman is another guy that's good for over 1.5 total bases a game, right? Talk about players' identity. I know that Mookie Betts at the top of the lineup is good for getting at least one more at bat than everyone else, so I can take that into consideration. But I do feel that it's a tough hill for this Dodgers team to overcome. And I think if you're looking ahead, you look at the Diamondbacks and whomever comes out of the Phillies and the Braves, and again, it goes back to what you know. You're looking at totals. You're looking at overs. You're looking at team totals. 4.5 is a sweet number for any of those teams, Philadelphia, Atlanta, or Arizona. Dodgers have a big hill ahead of them, and I think the time's turning for that team. I really do, but never count out Dave Roberts, right?
So I take it you're not taking them at 10-1 to come back and win the NL right now, even at that shiny ticket?
It's a smart question that you ask, and if someone's out there and they're up, 10-1 can change your rest of football season, right? Let's look at it like that. So if you have a little something, a fraction of the unit somewhere, you're comfortable, you're willing to forget it even exists, then by all means turn that into 10-1. Don't let the logic, the immutable laws of math ever be clouded by what people think they know about baseball and sports. It's still math. Wagering is always going to be math. Don't ever ignore that.
Before I let you go, before I get you out of here, Matt, I got to get your thoughts on one situation that in Major League Baseball that doesn't have anything to do with gambling, but I'm just curious your thoughts on it. The Mike Trout situation. We've watched Mike Trout struggle in LA for a decade and almost a half now. And
Yep.
I'm just kind of confused. I can't picture Mike Trout in a non-Angels uniform. It's never seemed like really winning was his main concern. What do you make of the whole Trout situation? Do you think the Angels deal him? And if you do, what do you think some potential landing spots could be? Where does he fit well?
Listen, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. If I knew all this, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be out playing the lottery. We live in a world where everybody wants to tell you that they know, and then no one's feet are ever held to the fire. I have too much respect for you. I have too much respect for your audience, myself. This stuff lives forever. I have no idea, and I'm not ashamed to tell you. I have no clue. There's a lot of things we could take into consideration. Who's going to be the ownership? What are they going to do? Where does he want to go? Where would he fit in? What kind of play? Dude, I got enough gray hairs. So, to that question, anyone out there that's pulling their head out, trying to force content, please remember that this stuff lives forever. Nobody knows what's going to happen. All I know is that Mike Trout is great, and I'm going to get to watch him play baseball. That's all I care about. I want him to be healthy. That's all I care about.
And he's definitely a market mover. Whatever team he signs with, you're going to see their win total go up a couple of wins.
Absolutely.
You're going to see their odds to win the league win, odds to win the World Series win. And yeah, and that's I think the biggest part of it to me is when you predict those kinds of things, not that the markets are even open right now, but when the markets do open in mid-November, that's one of the best things that you can play early before you think about what team is going to be the best or, oh, I think the Braves are going to repeat if they win the World Series, so let me go bet them the day after the World Series because that's going to be the best number. No, it's who you think is going to make the biggest change, who you think is going to make the biggest move, whether it's going out and getting a Mike Trout, whether it's signing Shohei Ohtani. Those are the teams that we look out for these season-long futures, these season-long props, those kinds of things. It's very good insight, Matt, and I think that a lot of us tend to forget that sometimes because it really is just trying to create that narrative and just kind of pulling content out, like you said.
It's the way of the world. I mean, I don't want to sound cynical, but it's our money we're playing with until it's their money, right? I've always said this, like, let's pad our bankroll to play with their money. But as long as it's our money, our kids' money, our friends' money, our mom's money, however it is, we got to protect that. So we can't get caught up in the hoopla of the world until it's someone else's money. Then we can have some fun.
Matt Stryker, you can hear him talk all about on how you should use their money to gamble on baseball. MLB Network's Bettor's Eye, Fantasy Sports Today on Sports Grid. Matt, thanks so much for giving us 15 minutes of your time on the Sports Wrap.
You kidding me? Thank you for having me. You guys are great. Thanks so much.
When we come back, we'll talk some NHL opening night. We'll get into the games coming up tonight, talk about all the NFL injuries going on around the league, and we'll get into some odds and ends, all that and more here on the Sports Wrap. The Sports Wrap is back on this Wednesday, October 11th. Gosh, we're almost halfway through October already. We're almost 2 weeks away from Halloween. Where has the time gone? Going into what, week 6 of the NFL season? My gosh, time is flying. I'm getting old. The hairs are getting gray. The NHL season got underway last night, opening night, and it was a good one. I'll go out there and say it. The NHL put a good product on screen. It started with the Lightning and the Predators. Lightning won this one 5-3. Nicholas Paul, Nikita Kucherov both had 2 goals in this one. Not going to lie, the Lightning looked back. They looked like a team that did not get eliminated in the first round of the playoffs by the Toronto Maple Leafs last season. They looked like a very electric hockey team. Now, the 5-3 came with an empty net goal at the very end of the game, but the Lightning dominated this one early. The shots were 13-2, 15 seconds into the second period. Also, UC Soros deserves a little bit of credit for the Predators between the pipes. He had an outstanding game. He saved 29 to 33 shots, but besides that, he saved 29 to 33 shots against the Tampa Bay Lightning, a stacked offense. I was very impressed with Saros' performance last night, but the Lightning, I was more impressed with. Man, they look like a championship hockey team early in the season. Now, obviously, we've got a long season ahead of us, right? No one wants to get ahead of themselves, and I'm not going to be the one to say, give them the cup today on October 11th, 2023, but when we get around to June 2024, I'm not going to say that I wasn't surprised if the Lightning are hoisting the cup. I'm not going to say that I didn't predict it back in October. They're a team that is complete. They're a team that is experienced. They know what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. The NHL postseason is one of the most grueling postseasons, if not the most, in sports, right up there with baseball. You see, it's evidenced by playoff beards that guys grow, right? And this Lightning team knows what it takes. By the way, John Cooper, great head coach, even better Hofstra lacrosse player. Shout out to Johnny C down in South Florida. Another game going on last night, the Blackhawks and the Penguins. And this one was the one that I was all eyes on. I was locked into this one. Why? Connor Bedard. Connor Bedard made his NHL debut last night. Now, there may be some of you who don't follow hockey quite as closely who are saying, who is Connor Bedard? Quite frankly, if you're saying that, you've probably been living under a rock. Connor Bedard is one of, if not the best, hockey prospects to come out of the world since maybe Alex Ovechkin. The kid is absolutely electric, and he showed it last night. Now, I was very worried. Early in the game, he looked rough. He looked nervous. His knees were shaking. He was tripping going up and down the boards. And I'm not going to lie, I thought for maybe a quarter of the period that Connor Bedard isn't ready for the NHL. Maybe he needs a stint in the A. He proved me very wrong very shortly after that. He got comfortable in that Blackhawks offense quickly, and they got to roll. And they scored 4 unanswered goals in this game. People forget. Pittsburgh went up early 2-0, and then the Blackhawks came all the way back. Bedard got the secondary assist on, I believe, the first Blackhawk goal. It was a tip-in, put-back kind of deal, but a point is a point, and that is his first of what I will assume will be very, very many in the National Hockey League. The kid looks really good, and there might need to be a discussion to be had about the Pittsburgh Penguins and where they're at as a franchise. It's kind of the same as their arch rival, the Washington Capitals. These are 2 teams that are kind of lost in translation right now. They've got these generational superstars, but they haven't really built the teams around them that they need. This is something that I'm very interested to see as this NHL season plays out, because we are at a point in a generation switch in hockey from the Crosbys and the Ovechkins to Connor McDavid and Connor Bedard, quite frankly. I don't even know if you could really consider McDavid and Bedard in the same conversation. McDavid has, I think it's about 5, maybe 7 years on Bedard. Regardless, it's a changing of the guard in the National Hockey League. And I'm very interested to see how this plays out with these pillars of greatness over the last 15, even 20 years. Alex Ovechkin, one of the greatest goal scorers the league has ever seen. Sidney Crosby, a great all-around player, both of whom have led their teams to Stanley Cups. And quite frankly, just have made it to the past their prime point of their career. It's very interesting. Pulling this up now, looking at the team point or to make the playoffs, let's just look at teams to make the playoffs. The Penguins minus 225. So the book thinks that they're still going to pull it together around Crosby and Malkin, but the Capitals are plus 230. Now, I will say, obviously, the Capitals going out and getting Max Pacioretty, they expected him to play a lot more and not necessarily start the season on IR. But what happened to the Washington Capitals? I'm not really sure. I don't think that anyone outside of Washington, not that I'm outside of Washington, but I don't think that anyone outside of Washington is really talking about that enough. They've got a generational player in Alex Ovechkin, and now they're plus 230 to even make the playoffs. Back to the game. Bedard looked electric. Blackhawks looked really good. They're going on a back-to-back tonight against the Bruins in Boston, home opener for the Bees. And especially after that playoff exit last year, you've got to imagine that the Bruins have something to prove tonight in front of their home crowd. So not sure I'd back the Blackhawks again tonight. We'll get into that in the preview here in a couple of minutes. But the final game last night was maybe the most dominant of them all. The Vegas Golden Knights and the Seattle Kraken, a team in their second year of existence, maybe third. Third. Check me on that. Versus the defending Stanley Cup champions. Now, normally, as a betting man, the play is always to bet against whatever team is hoisting the banner, right? They're always distracted by the pregame ceremony, the ring sizing, all the pictures, the big slot machine they had on the ice last night. Normally, that would distract a team. You'd think it would take them away from their focus on the game. Not the case with the Vegas Golden Knights. They came out and looked electric, and they pretty much dominated the Seattle Kraken. 4-1 the final. Adin Hill, still very, very good. 32 saves on 33 shots from a Kraken offense that is nothing to shake a stick at. Adin Hill has not gone anywhere, and last year was by no means a fluke. They look exactly like the NHL Cup or the Stanley Cup winning team, the NHL championship team from last season. The Vegas Golden Knights are going to be a very, very interesting team to follow. I don't know if I'd bet on them to repeat. Let's see. Their odds right now to repeat 13-1. I don't want to sell myself down the river after one game, but talk to me in a week or maybe 2 weeks, and we may be putting a future in on the Vegas Golden Knights. They looked that good yesterday. All right. Let's finish up this segment. Let's get into the action tonight. Loaded slate of games in the National Hockey League. We're finally getting into it, Jason. It's the best sports season of the year. We've got the football in full swing. We've got the hockey just getting started. Basketball's right around the corner. Playoff baseball, sports equinox season. How could you like anything more? All right. Senators and Hurricanes tonight. I don't feel any particular way about this game. I'm more interested in watching this game to see what these two teams look like and how we're going to wager against them down the road. Hurricanes are the heavy favorite, total 6.5, juice to the under. Canadiens and Maple Leafs is the game tonight that I think is going to be the game of the night. Maple Leafs, the heavy favorite in this one, better than 2-1 if you're betting on the money line. For the Canadiens, total here 6.5 as well. Heavy juice to the over. I'm going to lay the goal and a half with the Toronto Maple Leafs in this game. I just think that the Maple Leafs team, they didn't make too many changes, and they were a lot better than they'd been in years past. Last year, obviously, with the playoff series win, getting over that hump. But I like the Toronto Maple Leafs tonight. I really do, against the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens are a team that have been kind of in a struggle since they were in that Stanley Cup final during the COVID year in the bubble. I really like the Toronto Maple Leafs tonight against the Montreal Canadiens. Bruins and Blackhawks, told you about this one a little bit earlier. Blackhawks playing on the second night of a back-to-back. I think it's a pretty safe bet if you want to take the Bruins. Interested more so to see how Connor Bedard performs in this one. That's what I'll be watching the most closely for, because it's a big league thing going back-to-back multi-city, especially that much distance when you're going from Pittsburgh to Boston. That's what, an hour and a half flight. Different hotel room, interesting experience for Bedard tonight. Want to see how he performs, even if they limit his ice time. Jets and Flames ought to be a good one. I'd probably go with the road dog as the Jets just to get the value there. And plethora of 10 o'clock games as well. That's the first one. Then Oilers, Canucks, Avalanche, Kings, the other two. Probably would go Oilers, Avalanche parlay. Let's see what that pays. You can get it at plus 195. Two road favorites. Don't always like taking a road favorite, but less so applicable in the NHL. So you could sell me on that parlay at plus 195 of the Edmonton Oilers and the Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche, it seems like a missed number here, especially after the season they had last year against the Kings. You don't know. Got to finish up this NHL segment really quickly, giving our thoughts out to Barry Melrose, legend of the game in hockey, longtime coach, played as well, and then forever as a broadcaster. Grew up watching Barry Melrose, never got to watch him coach or play, but, always one of the coolest guys on TV. Said yesterday in a video that he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's and he's retired from any broadcasting and anything like that. So, Barry, thanks for everything you did for hockey over all the years. I know everyone's already said it, but I'll go on here and say it as well. We're wishing you all the best. And that's going to do it for our NHL talk here on the Sports Wrap. When we come back, there are so many NFL injuries. We're finding out all about them today, this morning. Everyone's going on IR. All the roster moves are becoming official with the new league week. Justin Jefferson, Devon Achane, James Conner, Anthony Richardson. The list goes on and on. It's a laundry list. We're going to get into it all. We'll tell you who to take in fantasy, what it means for these teams. We'll even talk a little trades, real trades, not fantasy trades. When we come back, it's the Sports Wrap on this Wednesday. SportsWrap rolls on this Wednesday, October 11th. NFL season getting into the nitty-gritty. Week 2 of the bye is coming up. And week 1 of horrible injuries in the league, man. We got a lot of them. Justin Jefferson, Devon Achane, James Conner, Anthony Richardson. The list goes on and on. Darren Waller didn't practice today. Not that Darren Waller matters a ton, but my goodness, what are we going to do? All right, let's get into these. Let's try to break them down one by one as best we can, because there are so many elements of each of these injuries, right? The fantasy impact, the wagering impact, how do the spreads in these games change? Deshaun Watson's not guaranteed to go for the Browns against San Francisco this week. Oh my goodness, how much is that spread going to change if they're starting DTR? Wow. We'll start off with Justin Jefferson. Rappaport reported this morning he's going to be out the next 4 games. What does that mean? Now, fantasy-wise, that means KJ Osborne is going to get a lot more targets. It means Hawkinson's also probably going to get a few more targets. It means it's time for Jordan Addison. If you drafted Jordan Addison and you put him on your bench before the season started and you've just been stashing him there, now's your time to shine. This is the moment you've been waiting for. If you can go out and get Jordan Addison somehow, go get him. Even if you need to trade for him. I think this kid is going to be very good, right? I think by the time that Justin Jefferson comes back in 4 weeks, Jordan Addison will be the wide receiver 2 of this team. I don't think it'll be KJ Osborne. Alexander Mattison. Now, the backfield of this Vikings team, it's been the story all fantasy season, right? They get Cam Akers. They have Alexander Mattison. How's everyone going to do with no Dalvin Cook? Alexander Madison's proven himself. Now, is he gonna stay as productive with no best wide receiver in the league in the lineup? No one would. Who would? Kirk Cousins won't either. If Kirk Cousins is your starting fantasy quarterback, as he is for me in a league, I'm a little nervous. I looked at the waiver wire because my quarterbacks in one league, I had Kirk Cousins and Anthony Richardson. So now I'm forced into a spot where I have to either start Kirk or go out on the waiver wire and get another quarterback. And who am I going to go get? Gardner Minshew? I think Kirk Cousins is going to produce a little better than Gardner Minshew, but if you've got an alternative option on your roster, that is an incredibly hard consideration you need to make. Now, speaking of Kirk Cousins, what are the Vikings going to do? We talked all season long. Heck, we started talking before the season started about whether or not the Vikings would trade Kirk Cousins if things didn't go well. Well, they haven't. And now this Justin Jefferson thing just adds another layer onto that cake. It's a pretty thick lasagna at this point. If you got to get rid of Kirk Cousins, you got to make a decision, I would say, in the next week and a half. You probably have before the beginning of week 8. No, not even, because then you're getting up against the trade deadline and values start to change. Kirk Cousins, the Vikings are going to have to make a decision on him very, very soon. You look at their next 4 games, the 4 that they'll have to play without their best receiver: Bears, Niners, Packers, Falcons. Now, off the top of your head, that easily could be 1-3. Easily. Just as easily could be 3-1. This is a coin flip for the Minnesota Vikings. It's as simple as that. Whatever they do, they just have to live with that decision. I don't think there's a right decision, but I also don't think there's a wrong decision that Minnesota could make here. They have to either extend Kirk now or trade him. They can't let it get to the Kirk Cousins specialty. I'm going to sign the franchise tag 3 years in a row, secure my bag, generational wealth forever. That's the Kirk Cousins specialty. I talk about it on the show all the time. Kirk Cousins, Hall of Fame, all-pro at securing the bag. When it comes to making money, Kirk Cousins knows how to do it. Doesn't matter how good of a football player he is, the man has made a ton of money in his life. I don't know what the Vikings are going to do. Like I said, I think it's a coin flip. I don't think there is a wrong decision. But whatever decision they make, they have to live with. If they're going to trade Kirk Cousins, embrace the tank. Go for however many losses you can build up this year, build them all up. See if you can get a Caleb Williams or a Drake May. On the other side of that coin, you don't have an unproductive team. KJ Osborne is not a terrible wide receiver. Jordan Addison has a lot of potential. Unlock it in these next 4 weeks. You've got no better opportunity. Again, coin flip for what the Minnesota Vikings should do with Kirk Cousins. But that will drastically change how you should use Justin Jefferson when he comes back from this injury. Devon Achane. This is a very interesting injury. I believe we got confirmation today that he will be officially put on the IR and miss the next 4 weeks. This kid is something else. He leads the team, the Dolphins, in rushing yards, and he has 20 fewer attempts than Raheem Mostert, who leads the team in attempts. That's mind-boggling to me. We can't forget that the Dolphins get Jeff Wilson Jr. back soon. They opened his 21-day return to practice window from the PUP list on Monday, I want to say. Maybe it was Friday of last week. I'm very interested to see where the touches go in this offense when they have all three healthy. Devon Achane is by far the most naturally gifted, talented running back in that backfield, in that running back room. There's no question about it. I think the running backs themselves would tell you that. Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. have experience, and right now this Dolphins team needs experience. They're the fastest team in the league, and a big reason for that is Devon Achane. But will that speed get them into the playoffs, or will they need to mix in some experience? That's why I'm more concerned about where Achane's touches go once he comes back from injury. That all compiled with the fact that he'll be coming back from injury, and teams generally are more hesitant to put their running backs into a workhorse role right off of injury. I'm not investing in Jeff Wilson Jr. yet, just because the price is so high because of the timing of everything. Him coming back from the PUP at the same time Achane gets injured. I'm not ready to invest in anyone in this Dolphins backfield. I'm staying away. And this goes into my contenders or pretenders from yesterday, but I really think the Dolphins, it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time with that. All right, James Conner. Now, this is a very interesting situation. I mentioned it at the top of the show with Matt. The Arizona Cardinals find themselves in a very, very unique position. They came into the season having, I believe, the best odds to have the worst record and the best odds to be the last team to win a game this season. And now here they are giving competition to great teams, winning games, but at the end of the day, they're still stuck in the NFC West, which right now is purgatory for the San Francisco 49ers, right? It's the Niners and everybody else. You can wait your turn. The Seahawks aren't doing anything. The Rams aren't doing anything. But the Cardinals are seemingly making people think that they might. I'm not sold on the Cardinals just yet, and especially because they're going to have to rely on Amari DiMercato now as their main back. My main question when it comes to this Niners team, when you look at it from a fantasy perspective, is how does this affect Josh Dobbs throwing the ball? How does Josh Dobbs become more investable in this Cardinal offense? Because I have a feeling, one, when you have a less experienced back pass protecting for you, he's going to be running for his life a little bit more. There are fantasy points there. And two, when you have a back besides James Conner in the backfield, you're more inclined to throw the ball. DiMercato had a good week when he came in for the injured James Conner. He finished as the RB18, 4.5 yards per carry and touchdown through 10 carries. It's not hard math. It means he rushed for 45 yards for those of you who were doing something way too hard in your head. But this Cardinal offense, man, I don't know. I'm not ready to invest all my fab budget in Amari DiMercato. I don't think he's that kind of running back. I think a lot of managers learned that with the Jerome Ford situation when Nick Chubb went down. The James Conner situation is almost season settling for the Cardinals, in my opinion, or should be. But we'll see where they are 3 weeks from now. All right, the last big one that I want to get into is Anthony Richardson. Now, through the first few weeks, and I was an Anthony Richardson drafter, I thought that the rushing equity was there, the strength was there. If he could tune the game to the Colts offense and learn the NFL, he'd be a successful quarterback. I don't know if injuries are going to be a problem his whole career, but it seems very early like they might. I'm not saying that I'm never going to invest in Anthony Richardson again. I think I got him in the 12th or 13th round this past season in the second tier of backup quarterbacks, but I don't know if we're going to be able to say that Anthony Richardson is going to be the face of the franchise for the Colts starter forever. Now, when you look at the more practical side of things, the part of it that's closer to the current juncture, they're going to Gardner Minshew. They're going to Gardner Minshew for Jacksonville, Cleveland, New Orleans, Carolina. That's 2-2. I think we can all agree that's 2-2 with Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew's a 2-2 quarterback. Now, I'm not saying which two of those games they'll win and which two they'll lose because, again, that's the Gardner Minshew effect. They could come out and beat Jacksonville and then lose to Carolina. That is just how Gardner Minshew quarterbacked teams are. But Anthony Richardson is a guy who I'm not going to invest in again in fantasy. The injuries this season have scared me off. We're 5 weeks into the year, and this is his second time that we've had to worry about a starting quarterback being injured, and it's not like it's the offensive line's fault. We know the offensive line in Indianapolis is one of the best in the NFL. They blocked for Jonathan Taylor when he was the best running back in the league. Anthony Richardson is going to be a very good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't invest in him. I'm saying I won't. Anthony Richardson has a ton of upside. There's a lot of potential there. He showed it at Florida, and he showed it in the games that he has played in for Indianapolis. I'm too worried about the injuries going forward, especially when you have quarterbacks, right? Quarterbacks who suffer injuries always suffer injuries. That's going to be my saying, right? That's my thing with Tua. It's going to be my thing with Anthony Richardson. It was my thing with Phillip Rivers back in the day. Seemed like he was always getting hurt. Seems like these guys are always walking on eggshells in terms of injuries. Anthony Richardson will be fine. The Colts will be fine. My fantasy team might not. Not going to invest in Anthony Richardson again. And that's going to pretty much wrap up our injury talk in terms of the biggest fantasy players here on the Sports Wrap. When we come back, we'll wrap up the show. Couple of odds and ends. I want to talk a little bit about the state of baseball. I got to the state of football yesterday. The state of baseball is a good one. Talk about it more on the other side. It's the Sports Wrap on this Wednesday, October 11th. Wrapping up on this Wednesday, Sports Wrap live on Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter. I was going to say Twitter, formerly known as X. Hopefully we get there one day. Twitch and a variety of other platforms, wherever you get your podcasts daily. Make sure you're checking us out, hitting that follow button, turn on notifications. You get notified anytime we go live. Remember, Jason's back tomorrow. We got Thursday night football on the card.
Yeah, I am back tomorrow. What's your X handle, by the way? Let people know.
At Sam_Yarnell on X. Give me a follow. I need more of them. I give out lots of picks on Twitter, so I actually don't, but I'll start. If you follow me, I'll start giving out picks on Twitter. I wanted to wrap up the show today talking a little bit about baseball, just generally, not specifically about the games or the playoffs or anything like that. I wanted to talk about the sport because the sport of baseball is, quite frankly, in a great place right now, a place that it hasn't been in 20 years, 30 even. We all know the statistics, right? John Heyman reported on them a couple of weeks ago when all the numbers came out for attendance this year in MLB. And we know that it was the highest it had been since 1993 expansion. The most people attended baseball games this year in 30 than they had in 30 years. You can't complain if you're a baseball lover like me. There's nothing you could complain about. I wanted to be the guy coming into the season who said the ghost runner on second base is stupid and the pitch clock's gotta go. I wanted to be that guy because when you're a 23-year-old and your opinions match those of 75-year-olds, people tend to gravitate towards it. But I love it. I do. I love that games are 2.5 hours now. I love that I'm home from a 7 o'clock game by 10 at night. Baseball's in a great spot. They've changed the rules exactly how they needed to modernize the game. They've done everything right. And I hate Rob Manfred. I've gone on rants for 5 years at this point about how Rob Manfred is the second worst commissioner Major League Baseball has ever had, behind those that sent Major League Baseball into lockouts and canceled World Series and so on and so forth. He got it right here. Uncle Rob did it. Like, he actually fixed something. I didn't know if he was capable of doing it, but he did. And I love baseball again, and kids love baseball again. And baseball's becoming popular in America again because for the last 15 years, it really felt like it was a dying sport. And for the first time in that long, it feels like it isn't. I wake up in the morning and get excited to talk about baseball, and I want to watch these playoff games. This is the first time I've watched a playoff game that my team hasn't been playing in since maybe 2017. My gosh, what have they done? They've completely fixed the on-field product. NFL, take notes. My gosh, you got to do what they did. Besides all of this, besides the on-field product, the great rule changes, the way that the game has evolved with science, with technology, and incorporated that just the same, the off-the-field presence of Major League Baseball players feels like it's at an all-time high. When you look at Major League Baseball players interacting with fans, I feel like that very much drives attendance and drives the progression of the game. And now you've got everyday players active on social media. Mookie Betts, with his podcast that he does with Bleacher Report, I believe they do it weekly. I'm sure that they aren't doing it as often during the postseason, but regardless, it's a way for the fans to connect with the player on a personal level. You've got David Ortiz, Alex Rodriguez, Derek Jeter. They're all doing the pregame and postgame show on whatever big network that is. I can't remember. It may be Fox, but it's part of growing the game. The fans feel more connected to legends. And then you've got the guys who are active every day on social media. Guys like Brent Rooker on Twitter. Trevor Rosenthal, also great on Twitter. Trevor Rosenthal, actually, over the past couple of months, has been doing this series on his Twitter of reviewing every visiting bullpen in Major League Baseball at every stadium. And it is one of the best Twitter threads. I don't know if it's a single thread or if it's multiple tweets, but it's one of the best things I've seen on Twitter as a baseball lover in a very long time. Brent Rooker going back and forth with fans about what is a sweeper versus a slider versus a slurve, and breaking it down from a fundamental standpoint so that these nobodies living all over the country can understand things that millionaires are paid to figure out at the highest level. Trevor May, a great relief pitcher, does YouTube and vlogs what it's like to be in the major leagues and talks about the benefits that come with being a major leaguer, but also how it's different than, you or I living in our everyday life. The different financial disadvantages they're at, the different financial advantages they're at, how their travel schedules impact their familial life, stuff like that. It's very interesting, and that level of connection is not single-handedly, but a huge element in the growth of baseball that we've seen. I talked yesterday on the program about football and how they're not doing this, and it's exactly the problem. Football is out here finding their best wide receiver in the sport $10,000 for one celebration after he made a great catch for a touchdown. Baseball didn't find a Jose Bautista when he slammed his bat after hitting an electric home run, or Tim Anderson for any number of the bat slams or spikes back when he was good. They don't find people for having fun. They're not the no fun league. Major League Baseball is in a very good place. The National Football League should take notes because they need to figure something out. And if they had more players like your Brent Rookers, like your Trevor Rosenthals, like your Trevor Mays, they'd be in a better spot than baseball, I could imagine. That connection with the fans drives the sport, it drives attendance, and the numbers show. Like, when you have players that interact with people on social media, when they show their human side, the connection is tenfold as deep. Baseball's in a great spot. I'm excited to see where it is when I have kids in 10 years. And I can't wait to go to games again next season with the pitch clock and with the ghost runner at second base. And that's something I could never have guessed that I would have said a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That's going to pretty much do it for this edition of the Sports Wrap. Jason is back tomorrow, and as will I be. We'll preview Thursday Night Football. Thank you to Matt Stryker for hanging out today, talking MLB postseason betting. Hope you're tuning in to all of those NHL games tonight, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow, noon Eastern, for another edition of the Sports Wrap. Talk to you real soon, everybody.